We're talking about purity and impurity. And I know this is such a riveting subject. It's so exciting. I know all of y'all that were so looking forward for Leviticus. When will we finally talk about sacrifices and get into all the nitty-gritty of the different types of sacrifices, the different types of purity and impurity? Well, this is your time to shine. This is the time to celebrate the arrival of Leviticus. This is the time to enjoy all the laws of purity and impurity. And I'm a bit facetious here because most of us, I would say, know nothing about this. And even in the Talmud has a shorthand, a Talmudic shorthand for the most intricate and complicated laws are the laws of Negoim and Olos, the purity and impurity that's featured in our Parsha. And our job here at the Torch Center, our job at the Parsha Podcast, especially year 8 of the Parsha Podcast, is to try to find a way to make it interesting, to make Leviticus understandable and entertaining, salient, and fun. So let's see what we can do. Our Parsha talks about purity and impurity, specifically the purity and impurity that results from having a baby. And that's the beginning of the Parsha. And then the bulk of the Parsha focuses on a different type of impurity, namely that of tzaraas. Now, what is tzaraas? It's some sort of discoloration that can be found on someone's body, on their person, on their garments, or on their homes. And this is a sign, this is an indication that they have sinned. And the Talmud lists a whole long list of sins that contribute towards this form of malady. And the primary sin for which tzaraas is afflicted to people is the sin of lashon hara. And our Parsha details the various stages of the diagnosis of someone who's a Metzora. If someone has a discoloration in their skin, all these different types of discolorations, the Talmud, in fact, tells us that there are dozens and dozens and dozens, 72 to be precise, different types of skin ailments and discolorations that would qualify as a tzaraas affliction. They come to the Kohen and they ask for a diagnosis, and the Kohen would either determine that they are in fact a Metzora, they have tzaraas, and they must go outside the camp, and there's an entire protocol of how they're supposed to behave. They have to tear their garments, and they have to let their hair grow out, and they have to behave as a mourner, and they have to cover their mouth, and they have to declare, I'm a tummy, I'm an impure person, and hopefully that process will cause them to repent, and then the Kohen will revisit them in their quarantine and see if the skin ailment has changed, because this skin ailment is only the byproduct of a sin. If that sin is remediated, if that sin is atoned for, well, then the skin ailment, the tzaraas, will go away as well. And that's their job when they're out, and they're out of the community. They're a pariah. They're ostracized. They are alone. They are in seclusion. And they're following the protocol of the Metzora. That will hopefully get them to repent. And once they solve the underlying cause, the sin that contributed towards this ailment, well, then the ailment itself, the symptom, will go away as well. That's the main subject of our Parsha and next week's Parsha, Parshas Metzora. Again, most years are put together. This year, because it is a leap year, they are separated. And the 3 segments that I prepared for you today for this Parsha podcast, they all relate to tzaraas, this type of impurity, the impurity that typically comes because of lashon hara. And the section begins, chapter 13, Adam, a person, tia be'or besaro, when he has on the skin of his flesh. He has the se'es, or sapachas, or baheres, different types of skin ailments that may in fact be tzaraas. And they come to the Kohen has to evaluate, he has to look at it, he has to assess it, and determine whether or not it's real tzaraas. Is it maybe tzaraas? Well, let's wait till next week, or maybe it's actually tzaraas. You have to go outside the camp and follow the protocol and so on. That's how our Parsha begins. Or not the Parsha, but the section that talks about tzaraas, how it begins. But if you read this verse very carefully, this is chapter 13, verse 2, it seems like there's an extra word. Tzaraas, of course, could be found on your skin. It could be found on your garments. It could be found on your home. Now this section begins with tzaraas on your skin. Well, the Hebrew word for skin is or. Now, or also means light, but or with an aleph means light, or with an ayin means skin. But the verse doesn't say when you find some sort of discoloration on your skin, it says be'or bisaro, the skin of your flesh. Now the truth is, the verse could have said, when you find any one of these things, the se'es, the sapachas, the baheres, and so on, these are different names for different types of ailments. It could have said quite simply, if I say someone has a rash, you know that rash is on their skin. So the verse seems to have a few extra words. It could have said, well, a person has a rash. It says, it's not what it says. It says a person who has a rash on the skin of their flesh. It seems like there's a few extra words here. There's some redundancy here. There's some extraneous words. And as we know from year 8 of the Parsha Podcast, whenever we see some extra words in a verse, if the verse could have omitted it, it would have. And thus every word is teaching us something. Every word has some sort of secret, has some sort of lesson for us. So why does this verse that introduces our subject, why does it have the apparent extra words, be'or bisaro, you have a rash, that should be enough. Why does it say you have a rash on your skin of your flesh? That is the question that the Or HaChaim, one of the great commentators on the Torah, that he asks. And his answer is unbelievable. Amazing. Moshe is talking to the Jewish people. And he's telling them about this incredible idea that you could have a physical manifestation for your spiritual misdeed. Tzaraas is not a skin ailment. And in fact, all the commentators talk about this and stress this point. It's not a skin ailment. It's not something you need to go to the dermatologist for. It is a physical manifestation of a spiritual blemish. When someone sins, someone does something that affects their soul, typically, certainly for us, there are no physical signs, there are no physical manifestations of that misdeed. And that's maybe why we ignore, or we tend to ignore. We're susceptible to ignoring the spiritual realm because we don't see it. We don't interface with it on a sensory level. So it's conceptual, it's abstract, it's distant from us. It's spiritual, you call it. It's not real. And if it is real, it's real, but we have to kind of make a leap to view it as such. When the Jewish people are on a very high level, when they are living on such a spiritually lofty plane, and they view the spiritual realm as being real and even more real than the physical domain, and the Ramban adds that to be in the land of Israel, when they're absolutely at their peak, then they have the tremendous benefit of seeing physical manifestations of spiritual standings. The spiritual realm is not invisible to them. When we do a sin, our soul is damaged, our soul is injured, our soul is blemished, our soul is impacted. But we are not necessarily aware of it. The Jewish people, when they were at their peak, they had this tremendous gift that the Almighty said to them, okay, when you do something wrong, I'm going to send you a message. I'm going to let you know about it. And it'll be physical. It'll be evident to all. So that way you know that you did something wrong and you can rectify. You can improve. You can atone. You can expiate that sin and return to being flawless, to be perfect. That's the concept of tzaraas. And the verse tells us that when a person has tzaraas, it's on be'or bisaro. It's on the skin of their flesh. Says the Or HaChaim, when someone has tzaraas, they have impurity. And there's a blemish. And there's something flawed in them. But the flaw, it's not fundamental. It's only skin deep. The flaw is, it's not on their essence. It's not even on their flesh. It's only on the skin of their flesh. There is a possibility for a person to become corrupted, and to become corrupted on such a level, to such an extent, that it overtakes who they are. It becomes inseparable from them. The Jewish people are being told here by Moshe, when you sin, when you have a misdeed, when you make a mistake, the blemish is only skin deep. It is possible for a human to become so corrupted that the sin overtakes them, and it burrows deep within them, and it overtakes their soul, and it transforms them fundamentally. Moshe is telling the Jewish people, when you sin, it's going to be on your skin. And it's not even going to be on your flesh, it's going to be only on the skin of your flesh. Certainly, your soul remains untouched. Only what interfaces with the external world, only that can become corrupted. This is how the Or Chaim interprets this seemingly extra words in the verse. The verse is talking about tzaraas, and there's corruption, and it's manifested in you, but it's manifested in you only externally. I think this is a very powerful idea, which will comprise segment number 1 here of this week's Parsha Podcast. Our nation, we were endowed with something very special from our forebears, from our antecedents. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, these are the founding fathers of our people. And the soul that they had and the soul that they perfected, that is what they bequeathed to us, their descendants. And we may be far, and we may be distant, and we may be sinful. But there's something within us. There's a core, there's an element that remains untouched, no matter what we do externally. There is a flicker of inextinguishable holiness that lies within each and every one of us, and that cannot be eliminated. We may be distant. We may become corrupted. We may make terrible mistakes. We may have done things that were problematic and we wish we hadn't done and are flaws. But our mistakes are really only skin deep. Because once you go to our essence, you discover something very special about us. You discover the fact that we descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we are the nation of God, and we were redeemed from Egypt, and we ate the manna for 40 years, and our ancestors frequented God's holy temple. And we have a soul that's capable of changing the whole world. That is our essence, and that will remain untouched. In the beginning of Song of Songs, there is a verse that tells us, well, the quote is, "Don't look at me, because I am dark, I am swarthy, because the sun has gazed upon me." So the author here, King Solomon, is telling us that I may appear to be darkened, but it's only surface deep. It's only because I got a suntan. And the Midrash elaborates, the Jewish people, we are not impervious to sin. We're not impervious to making mistakes. We can do terrible things. We can become dirtied, sullied with sin. But even when we do terrible things, we can very easily come back. Because those sins, those areas of ourselves that become covered over with sin, blackened with sin, it's akin to a suntan. And he gives an example, an analogy of a prince who made the unwise decision to go for a very long walk in the desert. And when he was in the desert, he got burned and he got suntanned and his face got all blackened and his whole body got blackened. And he enters the city finally after this long trek. And he looks terrible. But you give him some water, and you wipe him up, and you clean him up, and before long, he once again shines like a prince. So too, the Jewish people, yes, we may have done sins. Yes, we may have done idolatry. And we have become blackened. Our radiance, our resplendent beauty may have been harmed. We become sullied. But that, King Solomon tells us in the book of Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 6, that is akin to a suntan. This is the same idea that the Or HaChaim is telling us. Our Parsha deals with the unfortunate circumstance when one of our people, who really should have been holy and elevated and transcendent above the rest of humanity, we made a mistake. And there are immediate consequences to it. There's a physical manifestation now of this misdeed. There's tzaraas. But even then, the verse highlights it's only ba'or b'soro. It's only on the skin of their flesh. All of us, at our core, we're still part of this great fraternity of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The people who are at the vanguard of trying to change the world. The people who are God's emissaries and representatives in the world. The people who have this incredible soul, this fire within us that burns so strongly. I saw a quote this week that I really liked from John Steinbeck, the great American writer. He said that socialism never took root in America. Socialism was very popular elsewhere, but not here. Why not? Because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. If you're American, you have the American spirit. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to make it big. And well, right now I'm poor and I'm embarrassed by the fact that I really should be a millionaire and I'm not. That's the American mindset. And that's why socialism doesn't work over here. That is a parallel to how we really are as a nation. We're temporarily embarrassed princes and princesses. We're all the Almighty's representatives in the world. We're all the people that the Almighty said, you are mine, and I'm committed to you forever. We are all part of this kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We're the best of the best. And yes, we may be temporarily embarrassed princes, but we're princes nonetheless. And the verse is highlighting this. Yes, we may have sinned. Yes, we may have become corrupted, but it's only ba'or b'soro. It's only on the skin of our flesh. Idea number one, a nice idea to get us started and warmed up here on the Parsha Podcast. Here is segment number 2. Now, this is an example of a Torah idea that you and I, we can never hope to emulate this. This is an example of one of the earlier sages operating on such a different level than us. Only someone who's operating on a different level and who has total, absolute mastery over the entire Torah. Only someone like that can even conceive of such an idea. Our Parsha deals primarily with tzaraas. And there are many people, well, not many people, but there are a selection of people who had tzaraas that we know of historically. And one of them was actually a non-Jew, a foreign general, a general of Aram, and his name was Naaman. And we read his story in the book of Kings 2, and it's actually the haftorah for our Parsha Tazria. It tells the story of this Naaman, and he has tzaraas, and he has a hostage, a captive, a Jewish captive girl, and he has tzaraas and no one could heal him. And this girl tells him, well, go to the Jews, go to their prophets, and they'll heal you. So he travels to Elisha. He's this very important general. And Elisha tells him to go wash in the Jordan River 7 times. He does that, and he is healed. That's the story told in the Haftarah about Naaman's tzaraas and how it was ameliorated. Now, this is a very different system than the one that's outlined in our Parsha. In our Parsha, we tell of someone who has tzaraas, and it goes to the Kohen diagnoses it, tells him to be quarantined for 7 days, go outside the camp, rip your garments, let your hair grow out, cover your mouth, announce that you're tamei, announce that you're impure. That's not the protocol that Elisha put Naaman on. He gave him a very different prescription for how to heal his tzaraas. So here's the question. How did Elisha know that this is the proper protocol to heal Naaman's tzaraas? Listen to this calculation. Listen to this genius calculation. The word Naaman, so that's the name of this general, this foreign general that came to Elisha. But that name, Naaman, starts with the letter Nun and ends with the letter Nun. So Naaman. It starts with Nun, ends with Nun. There are only 3 verses in the entire Torah that start and end with the letter Nun. Now again, you and I today, maybe with computers, we can figure this out. The Megala Mukos, who's going to tell us this calculation, he lived 400 years ago, way before computers. So he just knew it all because he was an absolute expert on a level that we cannot even fathom. There are only 3 verses in the Torah of the 5,845 verses. There's 3 of them that begin and end with the letter Nun. The first one is in our Parsha. Negat tzaraas, an affliction of tzaraas, tisiya ba'adam v'huva el ha-kohen. The verse tells us that when a person, this is chapter 13, verse 9, when a person has an affliction of tzaraas, it should be brought to the Kohen. But the verse starts with a nega, letter Nun, and ends with ha-kohen, ends with letter Nun. The second time we have this phenomenon of a verse beginning and ending with the letter Nun, it's in chapter 32 of the book of Numbers. This is telling of the tribes of Reuven and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh. They want to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan River. They don't want to cross over to the west side. Why? You remember the story. They have a lot of animals and they want to stay where they could graze. There's lots of land for pasture there. So they want to stay on the lands of Sichon and Og, the lands that were conquered on the east side of the Jordan. And Moshe was upset with them. How could it be that your brothers will go to war and you're going to stay over here? It's not fair. And they say, no. We're going to go. We'll go and we'll lead, in fact, the conquest of the west side of the Jordan. And then we'll come back. And verse 32 of chapter 32 starts off letter Nun. Nachnu na'avor chalutzim. We will cross over and engage in the war of the land of Canaan. And then we'll maintain our ancestral lands on the east bank of the Jordan. And again, that ends me'ever layardain. So it starts off nachnu with the letter Nun and ends me'ever layardain, the letter Nun. That's the second time that it appears. And the third time that it appears is in chapter 18 of the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, verse 15. It's talking about future prophets. Moshe tells the nation, Navi mikir b'cha, a prophet from amongst you, me'achecha, from your brothers, kamoni, like me. God will appoint another prophet. Elav tishma'un, to him shall you hearken. This is the requirement, to listen, to hearken to prophets, to legitimate prophets. And again, that's the third verse, Deuteronomy 18:15, that starts and ends with the letter Nun. These 3 and these 3 alone of the 5,845 verses in the Torah start and end with the letter Nun. And again, Naaman, his name, this general that comes to Elisha, it starts and ends with the letter Nun. So, our question was, how did Elisha know that this is the proper protocol for treating Naaman to go, when he has tzaraas, to go into the water of the Jordan 7 times? So, the Megala says that Elisha, he meets this Naaman, and he sees that his name starts and ends with the letter Nun. And he also sees that he has tzaraas. So he realizes that there's a message for him in the Torah. The message is Naaman starts with letter Nun, ends with letter Nun. And he has tzaraas. Well, that's the first time that this appears. that nega tzaraas tia ba'adam, that when someone has an affliction of tzaraas, he comes to the Kohen. That's the first time that we have a verse that starts and ends with letter nun. And he comes to the prophet to get healed. Well, that's a reference to future prophets. Navi Metir b'char kamoni. When Moshe tells the Jewish people that there will be future prophets, it starts and ends with letter nun. And the third time that the Torah has a verse that starts and ends with letter nun talks about the crossing of the Jordan. And this is how Elisha pieced together this new protocol for Naaman, taking the 3 times that the Torah has a verse that starts and ends with letter nun, and applying it to this Naaman character whose name starts and ends with letter nun, and that's how he knew to tell him to dunk himself in the Jordan to be healed from his malady. That's an essay written by the Megalamukos. And again, for us, I don't know what the lesson is for us, but certainly we can appreciate the fact that we've had sages, again, going back 400 years, that had such mastery over the Torah on a level that's totally unfathomable to us, and are able to make these connections that we would, if we studied the Torah for 100 years, we wouldn't come up with this connection. But I thought it was a very interesting thing. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It's way deeper. It's deep and deeper and deepest of the sorts of scholarship that we've seen in the past on our Parsha. And I thought it was a fitting message to share. And this brings us to segment number 3. In chapter 13, verse 45, it tells us how a Metzora has to behave. V'hatzarua, someone who is a Metzora, someone who has tzaraas. Someone who has the affliction of tzaraas. Begadav yufrumim, his garments must be torn. He has to behave like a mourner. V'rosho yeparua, and his hair must be unshorn. And he has to cover his mouth, and he has to cry out, I am impure, I am impure. Now, the commentaries point out that this verse, again, apparently has some extra words. It starts off v'hatzara, which means someone who has tzaraas, someone who has the affliction. But then it continues, asher bo hanega, who has the affliction upon him. So why does the verse contain superfluous words? The person who is the Metzora, who has tzaraas, well, I know that they have tzaraas. You just told me, v'hatzara, the person who has tzaraas. Why does the verse need to continue and say, asher bo hanega, who has upon him this affliction? So the Kli Yakar says something unbelievable. Some deep insight. Why do people get tzaraas? Well, the primary reason, we know, it's because they speak lashon hara. They speak negatively upon others. You see a flaw in someone else. You see someone else does something wrong. You see someone who makes a mistake. You see someone that has a flaw, has a shortcoming. And you broadcast it. You share it. You publicize it. You notice it. And you say, this is something that they have wrong with them, and I want to share it. I want to proliferate it. That's how someone who speaks lashon hara, how they operate. The Talmud tells us that whenever you find something wrong with someone else, and you label them as flawed, and you declare their malady to all, you publicize that. The Talmud tells us, kol ha-posel, whenever you disqualify someone because they have a flaw, bimumo posel. It's only because you have that same identical flaw, only because you yourself are afflicted with that misdeed, with that shortcoming. That's the only reason why you're disqualifying them with that shortcoming. And thus, there's a deeper way to read the verse here. Someone who has tzaraas, the Metzora, asher bo hanega, that has that affliction. It's not referring to the affliction of tzaraas, but to the affliction of the flaw, of the shortcoming, of the malady that they tried to pin on someone else. only because you had this same flaw? That's the only way you found this flaw in others. The essence of Lashon Hara is v'hatzaru asher bo hanega. The person who has tzaraas, who has that same affliction, that same malady, the same shortcoming and flaw that they found in others. The essence of Lashon Hara is projection. You are disqualified by the same manner that you tried to disqualify others. Of course, this is all subconscious. We're not aware of our own flaws. In fact, we have a very hard time finding our own flaws. We're not aware of it, but deep within ourselves, in the recesses of our innards, we know that there's something wrong with us. We all have flaws. We all have areas that we need to improve in. And we have a tendency to express it upon others, to project our own shortcomings, to project it outwardly on someone else. And this is what our sages are revealing to us here. We all struggle to not say negative things about other people. It's much easier for us to find flaws and faults and shortcomings and problems with others than it is for us to find it with ourselves. And our sages are telling us, kol ha-posel, you disqualify someone else, bimumo posel. When you have tzaraas, asher bo hanega, that flaw, that affliction that you thought, that you pointed out in someone else, you actually have it yourself. And I think it could be very helpful to know this. It could be very beneficial. Because when you constantly find other people that are angry, that are unkind, that are not generous, that maybe are a bit impatient, that are flawed in whatever way, the kinds of flaws that you notice in others are actually a reflection of flaws that you have within yourself. That's what our sages are telling us. And this is a revolutionary insight. You find flaws in others. The type of flaws that you find in others are the ones that you have within yourself. And thus, if we want to engage in the dark arts of self-discovery, one of the ways that we can do it is by finding the type of flaws that we see in others. Because whenever we see flaws in others, that's actually a reflection of what we have within ourselves. And instead of projecting it outwardly and announcing it to the world and engaging in Lashon Hara, in taking our tongue and speaking it, we make a mental note of it. And we say, oh, that's probably something I have within myself that I need to improve upon. We have someone who speaks Lashon Hara, and they found some flaw, some shortcoming, some affliction in someone else. And they said it. They have tzaraas. And the Torah tells us that hatzarua, the person who has tzaraas, asher bo hanega, that has that flaw, that same flaw that they tried to pin on someone else. You rip your garments. You let your hair grow out. You behave as a mourner. You declare upon yourself, I am impure. You are sent out of the camp. You're in solitude. You're in isolation. And you're a pariah. No one wants to get close to you. Part of your process of atonement and cleansing yourself of this flaw is to ponder and to think where it came from. And perhaps, who knows, perhaps it may have come from within. A very deep and penetrating insight here in the verse that tells us that when you have tzaraas and when you found flaws in someone else, asher bo hanega, the affliction was actually within you. Again, these are hard parshios to go deep and deeper into, because there are lots of laws that are so intricate and ones that we may find to be a bit technical and not so interesting. But we have here some lessons that maybe we can take with us. Our sins, our flaws, they are within us, but they're only surface deep. They're only ba'ar basar, only on our skin. The skin of our flesh, not internally. Internally, we are very special. We may have become blackened and darkened with sin, but that's like a sunburn. Truthfully, we are princes and princesses. We have this incredible calculation of the Megalamukos, of the verses that begin and end with letter Nun. And finally, we have idea number 3. Hatzarua asher bo hanega, the one who is the Metzora, who has the affliction, the flaws that we tend to see in others. They are the ones that we may harbor ourselves. I appreciate your attention. I hope you enjoyed this Parsha podcast. I hope you're having a wonderful day, a splendid week, and I hope you have a terrific, uplifting, transformative, quiescent Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we will talk again next week. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback.